Mom spends hundreds of thousands of my money on my entitled sister's wedding, but I froze the account. My mom spends thousands of my bucks on my spoiled brat of a sister's wedding. Yeah, you heard that right. But guess what? I froze the account and threw a wrench in their plans. I'm in this weird spot in life. It's not really a problem, more like a dilemma. My mom and sister have been bleeding me dry for years, and now they've hit a new low. I've had enough. Cutting them off, though, would shove them into poverty, and even I think that's too harsh. But man, I'm done with their demands. I'm a 38-year-old guy, married with 2 kids, living in Ohio for the past 6 years since my wedding. Originally, I'm from Houston. My childhood was a mess. My parents divorced and Dad took off accusing Mom of cheating. To this day, it's up in the air if it was true or not because Mom never remarried. I was 10 and my sister was 5 when the split happened. They say Dad thought my sister wasn't his kid, leading to the divorce. For alimony, he let Mom keep the house we lived in and moved out. Dad paid for my education, but not my sister's. No child support for her, and I have no clue why Mom didn't fight for it. Maybe that's why everyone believed Dad's claim that she wasn't his kid. Dad wasn't around much during my childhood. He'd pop by my school to pay fees and bring some gifts. But when I hit high school, I reached out to him. Since then, he's been part of my life. He even came to my wedding despite Mom's protests. Over the years, I grew closer to Dad than to Mom. He even visited Ohio twice after I moved here, but then he got diagnosed with a terminal illness, and we lost him last year. Mom hated how close I was to Dad, and she turned cold toward me. Adding fuel to the fire, Dad named me as his heir. He remarried years after divorcing Mom, but had no kids with his second wife. He always said I was his only child. Naturally, Mom and Sis hated me because Dad loved me and left me his $400,000 trust fund. It wasn't just the inheritance. Growing up, Dad paid for my schooling, so I went to better schools and college than my sister and led a better life thanks to child support money. See, I was 10 when they divorced, and child support and my education money started coming in when I was 12, so Mom had little control over it. The education fees went directly to the schools and colleges from the child support money. Mom did use some of it for my sister and household stuff. I wasn't a dumb kid, so Mom kept me happy to avoid complaints. So I won't say they were evil to me, but they didn't like me. They were tight while I just existed there. Besides, I was smart, not just book smart, but clever. Not someone who could be pushed around. That's probably why Mom never mistreated me. All right, here's my current issue. The $400,000 Dad left me. Since Mom and Sis found out, they've been hounding me for loans. Honestly, this isn't the first time they've come to me for money. Ever since I started working, I've been helping them out. As my income grew, so did their demands. I don't owe them a thing, but I help because they're family, and they don't earn much. Mom works as a cashier at a supermarket, and my sister is in sales at a boutique. Together, they don't make half of what I do, so I feel obligated to help. We're not emotionally close, but they've never been outright nasty to me. Hope you all get me, and I'm not losing anyone with my feelings. A couple of months ago, my mom, Peggy, called me up. She said she wanted to renovate our old house. The walls, ceilings, and floors had seen better days. Ever since Dad left, the place had never been painted, and the wiring was never fixed. The ceilings and walls were crumbling from the corners. We never had enough money to keep up the house. Peggy said it was getting tough to live in that house, especially during storms or heavy rain. She said she'd gone to the bank for a loan, but the interest rate was sky high. I knew what she was getting at. She wanted me to cough up the cash for the renovations. It was a weird chat, because we both knew what she wanted, but neither of us said it straight out. After that call, I started ignoring her. She doesn't usually call much, maybe once a month, but last month she called 3 or 4 times. Finally, I picked up. She said it was unsafe to stay in the house because it was falling apart in bad weather. This time, she straight up asked for the money and promised to pay me back in installments. I asked her how much she was looking for. She said $100,000. I lost it. I said I don't have that kind of money to lend. She hinted about the inheritance. I was fuming but didn't bite. I said the max I could lend was $50,000. She agreed. Later on, I realized I'd been too hasty offering $50,000. I should have just ignored her, but I'd already said it, so I had to follow through. I didn't feel great about lending such a big chunk of change. My wife Tracy suggested I dole out the money in parts and keep an eye on the house repairs before sending more. I told Peggy I'd send $50,000 in installments. I had an old account back in Houston, so I reactivated it and transferred $10,000 there, giving Peggy access. She asked why I didn't send it straight to her account. I made up some excuse. This was actually Tracy's idea. We'll see how it goes. I hope Peggy pays me back, though I'm not holding my breath. Let's see. All right, so there you have it. Tracy's always been a pain in the ass, but she had a point this time. She said I needed to be careful because Peggy and my sister Jill were always scheming for money. And Tracy's right. Peggy's never been able to treat me like a doormat because I've always been too smart for that. Tracy's not much better, though. She loves to remind me how much she puts up with me and the kids. She even calls me a dumbass sometimes. But hey, what can you do? That's marriage, right? So here I am, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Peggy and Jill want money, and Tracy's riding my ass about it. But I won't let them bleed me dry. I just hope this whole mess sorts itself out soon. I can't put my finger on how Peggy and Jill tried to con me out of more money. It's been 2 months since I started sending money for the house renovation. So far, I've sent $20,000, and I'm not giving a penny more. I knew they were only nice to me for the money, but I didn't think they'd lie so blatantly to get it. If they had been up front, it wouldn't have stung this much. Recently, I found out Jill's getting married, but not from my family. I heard it from a buddy of mine. His wife is a wedding planner, and Jill's been working with her to plan a big fancy wedding. I think Jill didn't know I'm friends with them. A wedding costing $50,000 is no small affair. It hurts to hear about your sister's wedding from someone else. Forget about the invite. I wasn't even told about it. I thought it'd be a small, intimate ceremony, but my friend said the guest list is around 100 people. It broke my heart not to be part of that 100. Feeling sad is one thing, but I'm more concerned about the money. Where did Jill get the cash to fund such an extravagant wedding at one of the best venues in town, with unlimited food, drinks, top-notch decorations, and flowers? I checked the bank account where I'd been sending the money for Peggy's so-called renovation. The account was empty. I called Peggy to ask if the renovation had started. She said yes, they'd hired a company, but the work hadn't begun yet. I couldn't take her lies anymore. Until then, I didn't know for sure if they were using my money for the wedding, but it disgusted me to think they might be. For a moment, I wanted to fly down to Houston to see for myself, but I realized it wasn't worth it. Instead, I called Aunt Clara, my dad's sister, who lived a few blocks from Peggy's house. I asked if she knew about Jill's wedding. She said yes, but she wasn't invited either. Peggy's not fond of Dad's side of the family, so that's understandable. Clara said Jill's wedding was the talk of the neighborhood. Until a few years ago, their house was falling apart, and they were struggling to put food on the table. Now they have a sparkling new house and a grand wedding. I felt dizzy hearing this. Peggy said the house wasn't fixed yet, but Clara said it was freshly painted. Then I remembered that about 6 months ago, Peggy asked me for $20,000 for a knee transplant. I called her, pretending a friend needed the orthopedic details for her father's knee surgery. Peggy fumbled and said she didn't remember the doctor's name. I asked for the hospital details, but she struggled to say anything. She was caught off guard and pretended to have a network issue, then hung up. When I called back, her phone was off, then went unanswered. I sent a text, but it stayed unread for days. I realized she was lying. The money I gave for the transplant went to the house, and the money for the house was going to Jill's fairy tale wedding. Clara also told me Jill's engagement was on the front lawn of our house, decorated with lilies and overflowing wine. I felt like an idiot. I had no clue they were living it up while pretending to be poor in front of me to siphon money. So I ghosted them. I stopped sending money. When Peggy called, I didn't answer. When Jill, who never called me in years, tried to reach out, I ignored her too. I'm done with their lies and manipulation. I earn more than them, and Dad left me an inheritance, but that doesn't mean they can leech off me. I've sworn to ruin Peggy's princess's big day. Tracy, of course, couldn't shut up about it. She said, I told you so about 1,000,000 times. She loves rubbing my nose in it when she's right. Tracy said I should have cut them off sooner. But no, she had to keep reminding me what a moron I am for helping them in the first place. But this time she was right. Peggy and Jill thought they could play me for a fool. Not anymore. I'm through with their BS, and Tracy's nagging is a small price to pay for peace of mind. So I kept getting calls and voicemails from Peggy and Jill up until the day of the wedding. They kept asking for money, but I held firm and didn't budge. On the day of the wedding, the last voicemail Peggy sent me said she was ashamed of me, that she was disowning me, and that I should never call her Mom or visit her again. I was so heartbroken hearing that. I cried my eyes out in front of Tracy. Of course, Tracy just stood there, arms crossed, looking smug. I told you they were using you, she said, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. People might call me evil and stubborn for ruining Jill's wedding. Peggy also accused me of being arrogant and self-centered, but she never considered her lies. She deceived me all this time. I helped them because I felt I had to, because they were family. But to them, I was just an ATM. On the wedding day, I got a call from my friend Laura, whose husband was Jill's wedding planner. She told me the wedding was likely to be canceled because they hadn't paid the remaining installments for the expenses. I asked how much they had paid so far, and she said $20,000. I said $20K should be enough for a decent wedding. Laura said yes, but Jill had ordered top-notch decorations and food. The venue alone cost around $20K. She asked if I was attending. I said no. I had other plans. Laura knew I wasn't close to Peggy and Jill. Honestly, I was torn up inside because I knew I was responsible for ruining Jill's wedding. For a moment, I thought about transferring the remaining amount to Laura and telling her to go ahead with the wedding as planned. Then I remembered Peggy's last voicemail disowning me. What's the point of doing so much for them when they don't even want me around? My actions might seem harsh, but they were a reaction to their deceit. I turned off my phone and took my kids out for the day to distract myself. The next day, Laura called again, furious with Jill. The wedding had trashed her husband's reputation. On the day of the wedding, Peggy and Jill had begged Laura's husband to arrange something bare minimum for the ceremony and promised to pay an extra $10,000 later. He managed to pull together decent food and decorations because the $20K deposit mostly covered the venue. However, the guests and the groom's family trashed the arrangements, and Jill blamed everything on the planner. She told everyone the planner had messed up. Laura said her husband was so angry he wanted to spill the truth, but Peggy pleaded with him not to ruin Jill's life. He was a good man and took the blame, letting the wedding go on. And of course, they still hadn't paid the promised $10K. I felt so embarrassed hearing this about my family. I stayed silent while Laura vented her frustration. She wasn't blaming me. She just needed to share. I felt bad that my family had to go through such humiliation, but I was also ashamed of how they blamed everything on the planner. Tracy, ever the queen of snark, said they got what they deserved. She said I shouldn't worry about them. They brought this on themselves by trying to impress everyone with lies. I'm glad I'm away from their schemes now. Tracy's words, as harsh as they were, had a ring of truth. My mom disowning me might just be a blessing in disguise. Now, I don't have to deal with their lies and manipulation anymore. Of course, Tracy didn't miss a beat to remind me of how useless I was at handling my family. See? If you'd listened to me from the start, you wouldn't be in this mess, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She loves kicking me when I'm down. But for once she was right. Peggy and Jill thought they could play me forever, but I've put an end to that. I just hope I can keep things calm at home with Tracy breathing down my neck and my family out of my hair. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Peggy called my wife, Tracy. I warned Tracy not to answer, but she did anyway. Peggy cried, saying I had abandoned them. They needed the money for the renovation and the work was halfway done. Tracy, ever the gossip, couldn't resist. She told Peggy I knew the truth about the money going to Jill's wedding, not the house. Peggy broke down, promising it was all a misunderstanding and they needed the money urgently. Tracy, instead of showing any support, came at me with, "You're such an idiot for trusting them. Now look at the mess we're in." Peggy bombarded my phone with apologies after that. She said it was all a mix-up. They had borrowed money for the house repairs and were using my money to pay it back. I knew it was more lies, just like before. She pleaded with me, saying they were desperate. After constant calls and messages, I finally told her I would talk only if she promised to tell me the whole truth. She agreed. When I called, she confessed everything. Jill wanted a big, fancy wedding, but they didn't have the funds. So they decided to ask me for the money, pretending it was for the house. They figured I wouldn't know since I hadn't visited Houston in years and wasn't in touch with anyone there. I asked why they didn't just ask me directly for the wedding money. Peggy said Jill didn't want to owe me any favors. I couldn't believe it. They'd rather lie and cheat than ask me straight up. I told Peggy I knew she had used the knee surgery money for the house. She went silent. Then she said Jill's in-laws were coming to visit, and they needed to fix the house quickly. They panicked and made up the knee surgery story to get the money fast. I felt a surge of anger and sadness hearing this. My own mother and sister had been deceiving me all along. After hanging up, I cried for hours. I couldn't remember the last time I'd cried so much. Maybe when Dad passed away. I missed him so much. He was the only one who genuinely loved and cared for me. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from Peggy. "Now that you know the truth, can you please send the remaining amount so we can continue with the wedding preparations?" Her tone disgusted me. There was no remorse, just a greedy demand for more money. They didn't even invite me to the wedding, not even out of formality. I felt so frustrated that I blocked them both. I even warned Tracy not to entertain any more of their calls, and if she did, she'd be sleeping on the porch. I was dead serious. Tracy, of course, couldn't let it go. "See, I told you so," she sneered. "You're too soft on them. You should have cut them off long ago." I was tired of her constant nagging, but she was right. Peggy and Jill had been using me for years, and I'd finally had enough. Tracy was loving every moment of it, rubbing my face in my mistakes, but this time I was determined to stand my ground. Meanwhile, Aunt Clara kept me updated. She told me the wedding was still a hot topic in the neighborhood. Peggy and Jill were scrambling to put it together without my money. Good for them, I thought. Let them see what it's like to struggle. Clara didn't know the full story about the money, but she could tell things were tense. As the wedding day approached, I kept getting calls and voicemails from Peggy and Jill. They were desperate, begging for money. But I stayed firm, ignoring every plea. On the wedding day, Peggy left one final voicemail. She said she was ashamed of me, disowning me, and that I should never contact her again. It stung, but I knew it was all because I refused to be their cash cow anymore. Tracy, predictably, had more to say. "Good riddance," she snapped. "They don't deserve you." I stayed strong, despite Tracy's relentless bitching and the guilt Peggy tried to heap on me. This was my stand. No more being a pushover, no more being used. I just hoped I could keep the peace at home with Tracy's constant barbs and my family finally out of my life. The wedding day came and went, and I didn't hear a peep from Peggy or Jill. I figured they'd finally given up. But no. The next day, my phone lit up with messages from Laura. She told me how the wedding turned into a complete disaster. Peggy and Jill had begged Laura's husband to throw together something last minute. They promised him another $10,000, but of course they hadn't paid him yet. He managed to scrape together decent food and decorations, but the guests and the groom's family were not impressed. They criticized everything, and Jill put all the blame on the planner. Laura said her husband wanted to tell everyone the truth, but Peggy begged him not to. He was too kind-hearted and took the blame to save Jill's face. And still, no sign of that extra $10K. Tracy, with her usual lack of empathy, just laughed. "Serves them right," she said, smirking. "I can't believe you ever fell for their crap. You're such a sucker." Her words stung, but I knew she was enjoying this too much. I felt embarrassed for my family, but also humiliated by Tracy's constant jabs. "Maybe if you'd listened to me earlier, we wouldn't be in this mess," she added, not missing a beat. Laura told me she wasn't blaming me, but just needed to vent. I felt bad for her husband, who got dragged through the mud for trying to help. Tracy, of course, had a field day with that. "See, your family's nothing but trouble," she said, "always causing problems for everyone around them." I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and shame. Peggy and Jill brought this on themselves, and Tracy's relentless nagging wasn't helping. But I stayed firm. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into giving more money. "You're better off without them," Tracy said. "They've done nothing but use you." Days went by, and I started to feel a strange sense of relief. No more calls, no more begging for money. Tracy's bitching was still there, but at least it wasn't about Peggy and Jill anymore. I focused on my kids, trying to keep things normal for them. Tracy was always quick to remind me how I'd messed up, but I tried to tune her out. One evening I got a call from Aunt Clara. She said the whole neighborhood was talking about how Peggy and Jill had pulled off the wedding without my help. They managed to scrape together just enough to get through the day. Clara said the gossip was all over the place, with people wondering why I wasn't there. "I didn't tell them anything," Clara assured me, "but people are curious." Tracy overheard the conversation and couldn't resist adding her 2 cents. "Let them wonder," she said. "It's about time they faced the consequences of their actions." Despite everything, I felt a twinge of guilt. Peggy and Jill were family, after all, but Tracy's constant digs kept me grounded. "Don't you dare feel sorry for them," she snapped. "They got what they deserved." I knew she was right, but it was hard to shake the feeling of betrayal. My own mother and sister had lied and manipulated me for years. Tracy's harsh words were a bitter pill to swallow, but they kept me from caving in. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself slowly adjusting to this new reality. No more financial drains, no more lies. Tracy's attitude was still grating, but I tried to focus on the positives. I was finally free from Peggy and Jill's constant demands. Now I just had to figure out how to deal with Tracy's never-ending criticism. "You're finally growing a backbone," Tracy said one night, almost sounding impressed. "Took you long enough?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. I had to stay strong for myself and my kids. No more being a doormat, no more letting people walk all over me. Tracy's constant reminders of my past mistakes were a burden, but they also served as a lesson. I needed to be smarter, tougher, and not let anyone take advantage of me again. Just when I thought things were finally settling down, Tracy found a new way to needle me. One evening she came in from work, a smug look plastered on her face. "Guess what I heard today?" she said, not even bothering to hide her glee. "Your dear sister Jill is already struggling with her new husband. They're having money problems." I sighed, bracing myself for another round of Tracy's relentless digs. "What else is new?" I muttered, trying to focus on the TV. "They're probably regretting blowing all that money on that fancy wedding," she continued, ignoring my attempt to brush her off. "Serves them right." I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, even though I knew I shouldn't. Jill and Peggy had dug their own grave, but still they were family. Tracy, of course, had no such qualms. She was enjoying their downfall way too much. "Maybe now they'll realize they can't just use people and get away with it," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. Days turned into weeks, and every now and then Tracy would bring up Jill's struggles just to see my reaction. "You know, it's a good thing you finally cut them off," she'd say. "They would have bled you dry." It was always the same song and dance, her reminding me of how much better off we were without them. while also making sure I never forgot how stupid I'd been to trust them. One night after putting the kids to bed, Tracy decided to unload on me again. "You need to grow up, Mike," she snapped. "Stop feeling sorry for yourself and your pathetic family. They used you. Get over it." I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. "Tracy, I know they used me. You've reminded me enough times, but you don't need to keep rubbing it in my face." She crossed her arms, glaring at me. "Maybe if you'd listened to me in the first place, we wouldn't be in this mess." "Yeah, well, hindsight's 20/20, I shot back, tired of her constant berating. "I've learned my lesson, okay?" Tracy rolled her eyes. "We'll see. Just don't expect me to feel sorry for you when they come crawling back, 'cause they will, and you'll probably fall for it again." Her words stung, but I knew she was right about one thing. I couldn't let Peggy and Jill manipulate me anymore. I had to stay strong, not just for me, but for my kids. Tracy's constant bitching was a daily reminder of what I'd allowed to happen, and I needed to prove to myself that I could change. One Saturday, I got a call from Aunt Clara. She had more gossip about Jill and her husband. "Mike, I heard from a neighbor that Jill's husband is already looking for a second job. They're in deep financial trouble," she said, sounding genuinely concerned. "Yeah, I figured that might happen," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thanks for letting me know, Aunt Clara." Tracy overheard the conversation and, of course, had to add her 2 cents. "Told you so," she said with a smirk. "They're getting exactly what they deserve." As much as I hated to admit it, Tracy was right. Jill and Peggy were reaping what they had sown, but it didn't make it any easier to hear about their struggles. It was a constant tug-of-war between my sense of obligation and the need to stand my ground. The weeks went by, and I focused on my job and my kids, trying to keep Tracy's biting remarks at bay. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Tracy looked at me with a rare expression that almost seemed like concern. "Mike," she said slowly, "I know I've been hard on you, but you need to stay strong. Don't let them pull you back in." I was surprised by her tone, softer than usual. "I won't, Tracy," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm done being their doormat." "Good," she replied, her usual sharpness returning. "Because if you let them take advantage of you again, I won't be here to pick up the pieces." It was a harsh reminder, but maybe one I needed. I had to keep moving forward, no matter how tough it got with Tracy's constant criticism and my family's manipulations. I had to be stronger, for myself and for my kids. There was no turning back now. As the weeks rolled on, I tried to focus on my own life, keeping my distance from Peggy and Jill. But one day, out of the blue, I got a letter from Peggy. It was handwritten and full of pleas for forgiveness. She said they were desperate and didn't them to know what else to do. They were sorry for everything, and Jill VDJ Tim's marriage was falling apart because of their financial struggles. I showed the letter to Tracy, hoping for a bit of sympathy. Instead, she snatched it from my hand and read it with a smirk. "VJ and Jari, you seriously considering helping them again?" "DJKJ," she scoffed. "VDJ and J Thave J Tim are just trying to play you like a fiddle, Mike. Don VDJ might be a fool. DJJ, VDJ and J Tracy, they've just re my family." "DJKJ," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "VDJ and I can D Tim, just turn my back on them completely." "DJK," she threw the letter on the table. "VDJ and J, you already did, and look how much better off we are. You need to get it through your thick skull that they've are never going to change. They've will keep using you until their GTM's nothing left." "GKJ." Her words hit hard, and I knew she had a point. But it was tough to ignore the guilt gnawing at me. I picked up the letter and read it again, feeling torn. My instinct was to help, but Tracy VJATM's relentless criticism had worn me down. That night, as we lay in bed, Tracy turned to me, her voice unusually soft. "VDJ Mike, I know I VJTMV been hard on you, but it VDJTM's because I care. I don't VJTM it want to see you hurt again. Promise me you VJTM will be strong and not let them back into your life." "DJKJ," I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. VD Angie, I promised Tracy I wouldn't let them use me anymore. DJKJ. The next morning I called Aunt Clara to update her. She was sympathetic but agreed with Tracy. VD Mike, you need to focus on your own family now. Peggy and Jill have made their bed. Let them lie in it. DJKJ. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a strange sense of liberation. No more desperate calls from Peggy, no more guilt trips from Jill. Tracy, though still bitchy, seemed a bit more relaxed. She even praised me once in a while for standing firm, though she couldn't attempt to resist adding a sarcastic twist. VDAGNC, I knew you had it in you to grow a backbone. DJKJJ, she said with a smirk. But the biggest surprise came when Jill showed up at my doorstep one evening. She looked haggard and worn out. VDJ Mike, IVDJ. So sorry for everything. DJKJ, she said, tears streaming down her face. VDJNJI was selfish and greedy. I just wanted my dream wedding, and now at VVDTM's all ruined. GKJ Tracy, standing behind me, crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. VDJ, what do you want now, Jill? GKJ, she snapped. VDJ, more money? JK, VJNJ, no, VJJ, Jill sobbed. VJNJ, I just wanted to apologize. I know I don't to deserve it, but I've asking for your forgiveness. JK, I felt a wave of emotions. J, anger, pity, sorrow. VDJ and J, Jill, you hurt me deeply. You and Peggy both. But I can keep living with this anger. I forgive you, but I can't help you anymore. You need to figure this out on your own. DAKJ, Jill nodded, wiping her tears. VDJNJ, thank you, Mike. I understand. IVJ, Tim, I'm truly sorry. JJ. After she left, Tracy looked at me, surprisingly silent. For once, she didn't have a snide remark. Instead, she just nodded. VDANJ may be there, VDJTM's hope for you after all, VDJKJ, she said quietly. In the end, I realized that standing up for myself didn't VJTMT mean I had to be heartless. I could forgive, but I didn't VJTMT have to forget. Tracy VJTM's constant jabs had toughened me, but they also made me more resolute. I had to find a balance, VJ being compassionate without being a pushover. As I watched Jill walk away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Maybe things would never be perfect, but at least I had finally taken control of my life. And with Tracy by my side, bitchy as she was, I knew I had the strength to face whatever came next.